Moscow is now explicitly ruling out stopping the war along the current front line. Sergey Lavrov says Russia does not even consider that an option, once again framing the war through the Kremlin's rhetoric about Nazism and Russia's supposed historical mission.
More and more voices from different parts of our common space are calling for an immediate halt. That is not going to happen. We should stop only when there is a long-term, reliable and sustainable settlement. If we were to stop now along the current line of contact, we would, in effect, be erasing the achievement of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers who defeated Nazism. That is simply not something we can consider.
Dictator Putin has delivered a rather telling message to Russia's military. Ukraine is the priority, but the front line, in his view, no longer ends anywhere near Ukraine. Speaking to the crew of the Russian missile cruise Varyak, Putin said there is nothing more important for the military right now than the war against Ukraine.
Yes, nothing is more important than carrying out tasks on the line of contact as part of the special military operation. But you are not in the rear. You are also on the front line.
Russia is now trying to turn the shadow fleet story upside down. After years of using opaque ownership, flags of convenience and complicated shipping networks to keep its oil moving despite sanctions, Moscow is suddenly presenting itself as the defender of international maritime law. Sergey Lavrov says the European Union has created its own rules and is now labeling vessels as shadow fleets simply because they refuse to follow Brussels. And he's warning that Europe has chosen what he calls a very dangerous path.
The European Union has decided to apply its own law, if one can call Brussels' illegal decision law, which was designed to limit Russia's ability to earn money on global markets. And all vessels that do not obey the European Union under any flag have been declared part of a shadow fleet. This is a very dangerous path.
Lavrov's argument is not longer just that Europe is applying sanctions too aggressively. He says Brussels has effectively put its own political decisions about international law itself in Moscow's version of events. The problem is not Russia's sanctions-busting shipping system, but Europe daring to interfere with it. That is a fairly remarkable reversal.
I say with pride, and with the kind of self-satisfaction that is very characteristic of the current European elites in power, that their decisions stand above international law.
The dispute over Russia's so-called shadow fleet is increasingly turning into a direct confrontation over who gets to enforce rules at sea, where sanctions end, and where Moscow claims Europe is crossing into outright seizure of Russian-linked assets. Maria Zakharova has once again returned to one of Moscow's oldest narratives about Ukraine: denazification, demilitarization, and the claim that Kyiv is persecuting the church. She says these objectives remain relevant and will be achieved. She accuses Ukraine of attacking the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church and trying to seize its property. But there is one very obvious problem with that argument. While Moscow talks about protecting churches, Russian strikes have damaged some of Ukraine's most important religious site. The Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra, a monastery nearly 1,000-year-old, has been hit during Russian attacks. In Kherson, Russian shelling has also damaged historic churches that had stood for generations.
All the facts listed above confirm that the objectives of the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, as well as the elimination of threats originating from its territory, remain relevant. These objectives will definitely be achieved.
Russia is no longer provoking only Europe. Now Moscow is waving a red flag directly in front of Japan. Dictator Putin has traveled to the disputed Kuril Islands for the first time as Russian president, territory controlled by Moscow but claimed by Tokyo. He went to Iturup, one of the 4 southern islands at the center of a dispute that has lasted since the end of the Second World War. Russia and Japan still have no formal peace treaty, and Moscow has steadily strengthened its military presence there. Putin arrived after observing Pacific Fleet exercises and spoke about protecting Russia's borders and territories.
It's clear that the main objectives are being addressed today, during a special military operation. But it is our shared responsibility to ensure the security of the Russian state at all its borders, in all its territories. This territory is complex. Yesterday, the commander assessed the situation in the region, and I fully agree with him. I would like to hear from you today, to hear your suggestions on what additional steps need to be taken to create the conditions for you and your subordinates to most effectively address the common challenges facing you.
Tokyo calls these islands the Northern Territories and says they are an inherent part of Japan, both historically and under international law. Relations were already badly damaged after Japan joined sanctions against Russia over the war in Ukraine. So now Putin has personally appeared on one of the most sensitive disputed islands, while Russia is also increasing military activity in the Pacific.
The Northern Territories are an inherent part of Japan's territory, both historically and under international law. This latest visit to Etorofu Island, Iturup for Russia, by the incumbent Russian president is incompatible with Japan's consistent position regarding the Northern Territories. It also hurts the feelings of the Japanese people and is absolutely unacceptable.
Tokyo also says the visit has made any future improvement in relations even harder. Japan has summoned the Russian ambassador, and the dispute is now moving beyond all diplomatic arguments. Putin's trip was a direct political signal that Moscow is prepared to challenge Japan over territory while already fighting a major war against Ukraine and confronting Europe.
Russia's aggression against Ukraine, Japan-Russia relations are in a difficult state. Even under such circumstances, Japan has made every possible effort. However, this visit has further hardened public sentiment toward Russia in Japan and, it must be said, has made it more difficult to restore bilateral relations over the medium to long term. We hope the Russian side will fully appreciate the seriousness of this matter.
The Institute for the Study of War believes the timing is unlikely to be accidental. Japan has just released a new defense white paper that names Russia as one of the country's critical security threats and calls for stronger defense capabilities. Moscow has already attacked that assessment, and Putin's appearance in the Pacific now looks like a message to Tokyo. The Kremlin is watching Japan's military shift and is ready to respond. The concern is not theoretical. Russian military aircraft already operated frequently in the region, forcing Japan to scramble fighter jets. So what looks like a presidential visit to a remote island may actually be part of a much bigger confrontation developing in the Pacific.
Putin's visit to the disputed Kuril Islands is likely part of the Kremlin's response to Japan's 2026 Defense White Paper, published earlier in August, and aims to undermine Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's efforts to improve Japan's defense capabilities. Putin criticized the Japanese White Paper for identifying Russia as one of Japan's critical threats. Putin's comments addressed the need for Russia to ensure security on all of its borders, all of its territories, a noteworthy statement in the context of frequent Russian air operations requiring Japan to scramble aircraft in response, as noted by the White Paper.
President Volodymyr Zelenskyy visited the Ivano-Frankivsk region, where he paid tribute to fallen Ukrainian soldiers and observed a minute of silence. At the same time, Ukraine continues a series of successful deep strikes against Russian military and energy infrastructure. Ukrainian forces hit a major oil refinery and petrochemical complex in Bashkortostan, far from the Ukrainian border. Ukraine has also struck Russian naval and military targets in Novorossiysk on the Black Sea. These attacks are part of a wider Ukrainian effort to hit the infrastructure, fuel and military assets that help Russia continue the war. Ukraine has brought home the bodies of another 261 fallen soldiers. Russia received the bodies of 24 of its servicemen. There was also a separate exchange of civilians at the Belarusian border. 7 people were released by Russia and 8 by Ukraine. But behind these numbers is a much bigger problem. Ukraine says thousands of its civilians are still being held inside Russia, many of them without official confirmation of where they are. And just days before this exchange, former Ukrainian prisoners spoke at the United Nations about what happens behind the walls of a Russian detention facilities.
My main idea during this meeting, during the Security Council, was to bring out the the narrative with which Russians are building their ideology of hatred, of which we thought that would not exist in 21st century. But it happened so that Russians, to accumulate the hatred among their own ethnicities within their country, they trying to point that hatred in the direction of other ethnicities. So I was sharing my experience in captivity, not when I was being treated poorly, not for only being Ukrainian, but also for being a half Cuban.
Ukraine's HIMARS crews are still hunting high-value Russian targets despite skies crowded with the drones. When a Russian reconnaissance drone appears overhead, the launcher disappears into cover. Once the sky clears, it moves out, fires, and relocates within minutes.
When the first HIMARS was sent to Ukraine, they changed the course of the war. It was tangible. Now they continue to do so, because every departure of the vehicle, every work we do, is an effective hit and destruction of the enemy.
Drones have changed the battlefield, but HIMARS still has one major advantage: speed. It can hit artillery systems and drone control points almost immediately after they are detected.
The effectiveness of this machine lies in the fact that it has the ability to shoot and hit targets at a greater distance than our FPV drone, and the accuracy of the hit is also 100%. That is, when the drone cannot fly 20 to 30 kilometers deep into the enemy, our missile flies in.
The brigade says its crews operate every day.
Our brigade always has enough missiles, but if there were more missiles, there would be more targets destroyed. That is, the guys at HIMARS work 25/8.
Russia's long-range strikes are pushing the cost of the war deeper into ordinary life. Apartment blocks, roads, railway lines, city streets. The latest UN assessment shows just how sharply that pressure has grown. July was not simply another difficult month for Ukraine. It marked a new peak in civilian harm, with the situation worsening much faster than a year ago. And the UN warns that even in the confirmed tolls does not capture the full picture.
The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission verified that at least 437 civilians were killed and 2,610 injured in Ukraine in July, which is a 30% increase compared with the previous month and a 70% increase compared with July 2025. The actual figure is likely higher as the monitoring mission continues to verify information.
Thank you for watching. That's all for now. Please subscribe on my personal channel, Not Just Politics.